Hi everyone, welcome to fullstackmania. In this video, we are going to learn about circuit breaking with Hystrix. So, we have two services, student and teacher, which are returning some valid responses. Now, we are calling the student and teacher service from the BFF service and returning a combined response. So, we are going to implement Hystrix on the BFF service, and if one of the service out of student and teacher is down, then we'll see how we can return the hard-coded fallback response. Without any further ado, let's get started. So I have implemented the student service and teacher service. Let me walk you through the code. In the student service, I have the student controller where I have hard-coded few of the students. Okay, and when you send the request, you have to send the ID and it will find out the corresponding student from the list and it will return the student. Okay, so let me demonstrate this. If you go to the student and send the request to ID, if you send the request, then it will return the corresponding student. If you send the request to 1, it will return the corresponding student. Okay, similarly for the teacher service, let me open the teacher service and go to the teacher controller, and here I'm returning a simple teacher. I am not sending any ID. It will always return the same teacher. Okay, so if you go to this teacher service, it is returning the same teacher. Now let's implement the BFF service, which will call the student and teacher service. So I have created a BFF service application with Spring Starter web dependency, and on the project root I have added the REST template as a bean because I am going to do external calls to the student service and the teacher service. Now as we need student service and teacher service, I just copied the model of the student service and the teacher service here. Okay, so this is the model that I am using, and I want to give a combined response. So I have created a student profile service where the student and teacher are added as a secondary dependency. Okay, and I have added the getter setters of this. Okay, now let's go to the controller, and here we are sending the request with the help of the ID, and with the help of the REST template we are sending the REST calls. Okay, so here I am sending the request to the student service and I am getting the student response back, and here I am sending the request to the teacher service and I am getting the teacher response back. Now I am creating a new object of the student profile which I am going to return, and I am setting the student and teacher to the respective variables, and I am returning this finally. Simple, right? So if we send the request to the student profile, we are getting this response. Okay, so we are getting the teacher and we are getting the student. Okay, if you send the request to the student 2, then we are getting the corresponding student. Okay, and we are getting the same teacher because it is the same one. Fine, let's implement Hystrix. To implement Hystrix, first we have to find out where we should implement Hystrix. The ideal place is which service is doing the external call. In our case, the BFF service is doing the external calls. So this is the place where we should implement Hystrix. First, let's go to the pom.xml and add a dependency. The dependency is spring-cloud-starter-netflix-hystrix. Okay. Now let's go to the project root where we are having the @spring boot application annotation, and add a annotation enable circuit breaker. Okay, so let's add that annotation. So @enable circuit breaker. Okay, you can see this annotation is deprecated because in the latest Spring Cloud version Hystrix is deprecated. Now Resilience 4J is the latest option. Now let's find out the method which is doing the external call. In our case, getStudentProfile is the method which is doing the external call. So we have to add an annotation @Hystrix command to this method. Okay, and if you see the parameters in the Hystrix command annotation, we can see one parameter fallback method. So this parameter is going to take a string which will be the name of the method it should call. Okay, so here we'll give the name of the method. Let's say we'll write fallback student profile. Okay, fallback student profile. Okay, and we are going to create the method. Now the new method should have the same method signature as the method which is having @hystrix command. So I'll copy this. Now I'm copying this and I'll paste this over here, and then I'll change the method name to fallback student profile. Okay, and here I am going to return a hard-coded student profile. One thing to note, that we should not do any external call on the fallback method, because if the fallback method is also going to fail, then no point of calling it a fallback method. So at most we can return the data from the cache, or we should return the hard-coded response in the fallback method. So for the fallback, I implemented a hard-coded student and a hard-coded teacher, and I set the student and teacher instance to the student profile object, and finally I am returning the student profile. Okay, so let's test this. Now all the services are up and running. Let's go to Postman, and if we send the request now, then we'll get the actual response. We are sending the request to the student number 2, and now if you see, we are getting the student 2 and the teacher 1. Okay, because we have only one teacher. Now let's kill one of the service. Let's say we are killing the student service. Okay, and let's go to Postman now and send the request. Now we are getting the hard-coded teacher as well as the hard-coded student. Okay, now let's switch this. Let's say we'll start the student service and we'll kill the teacher service. Okay, and if we send the request again we are getting the hard-coded response for the student and teacher. That means if one of the call is failing, that then Hystrix is calling the fallback method, and inside the fallback method everything is hard-coded, which is the kind of desired response, but not 100%, because here still one of the service is up and that can give the live data, but because the other service is down, we are hard coding the entire response, which is not good. Now let's see how Hystrix works. So whenever we are having a Spring API or Spring Bean, and we are having a method that is having @Hystrix command annotation, then Spring Boot is going to wrap that bean with a proxy class, and that proxy class is going to have the circuit breaker logic. Like in our, let's see our scenario. So if you see the BFF controller class, let's go back to the BFF controller class. This method is having @Hystrix command annotation. So the BFF controller class is wrapped with a proxy class, and that proxy class is having the circuit breaker logic. Now remember, whenever we are calling this endpoint, Spring Boot is calling this method directly. We are not calling this method. And Spring Boot is smart enough to take that proxy class and call this method on that proxy instance. Okay, that's how Hystrix is working in this scenario. We need this understanding for the later part of this video, so just remember this. Okay. Now, as the Hystrix command is on a common method where two REST calls are going on, if one of the REST call is going to fail, then Hystrix is going to call the fallback method, but the other call can return the live response. To avoid this, let's split the two REST calls into two different methods and try this. So let's refactor the code. So we are going to refactor this. Right click, refactor, and extract method. And here I am going to give the method name as something like student API call and click on OK. And let's refactor the other one. So I am going to right click, refactor, extract method, and going to give the name as teacher API call. Okay, so we have extracted the two REST calls into two different methods, and we are going to use @Hystrix command on those methods. Okay, so for the student I am using the @Hystrix command, and the fallback is fallback student profile, and for the teacher also I am going to use the Hystrix command, and we are going to change the fallback to fallback teacher profile. Okay, let's create the fallback teacher profile as well. Now the method signature should be same as this one. Okay, so let's copy this and let's return the hard-coded teacher over here. So let's copy this line number 46 and paste it in the teacher fallback. Okay, and return the teacher. Similarly, for the student, we don't need the line number 47, 48, 49. So let's remove this and let's return the student s over here, and let's change the return type of the student profile to student. Okay, and last but not the least, let's change the teacher fallback method name correctly. So here I have to give it fallback teacher profile. Okay, so we have extracted the REST API calls outside the common method, and this is the teacher API call, and this is the corresponding fallback method. Similarly, this is the student API call and this is the corresponding fallback method. Now, as both the service calls are having their corresponding Hystrix command, so we can delete the Hystrix command annotation from the main method where we are doing the two calls. Okay. So we have successfully refactored the code, but if you are going to follow this approach, then this is not going to work. The reason is, let's say we are calling this teacher API call from line number 22, right? So whenever we are at line number 22 and calling this teacher API call, we are calling this method from the BFF controller instance. Okay, so when our call is at teacher API call, the instance is the BFF controller instance, not the proxy instance. There is no point of proxy over here. Previously, when the @Hystrix command was here and we were doing the REST call directly here, then at that time we are sending the request to this endpoint from Postman, and Spring Boot was calling the getStudentProfile method. So Spring Boot had a chance to auto-wire the BFF controller proxy and call getStudentProfile on that proxy instance. So the only option pending with us is take the API calls outside of this class and auto wire those class in this class and call the API methods with that auto wire instance, so that Spring Boot will auto wire the proxy instances. So I have created a Hystrix service package and I'm going to create two classes over here. One is student Hystrix service and mark this with @service, and the other one is teacher Hystrix service and mark this class with @service. Now let's go to the BFF controller and take the student call to the student Hystrix service, and in the teacher service let's go to the BFF controller, and the teacher part we are going to take it to the teacher service. Okay, now we don't need REST template over here. Let's take this REST template and put it in the student BFF service, and we need it in teacher BFF service as well. Okay, so let's save this, and now let's auto wire this student Hystrix service, and let's auto wire the teacher Hystrix service over here. And now let's call these methods with the help of the student Hystrix service and the teacher Hystrix service. Now the problem is the methods are private over here, so let's make it public. Okay, and here also it is public. Okay, with this, now if we are successfully implemented this. Okay, now let's start all the services. Let's start the student, teacher, and the BFF service. Okay, let's give it some time, and within some time all the applications will be up and running. Okay, now let's test all the services. Okay, so if you go to Postman, now all the services are up and running. If you send the request to the second student, then you will get the actual response here. Okay, so we are getting the actual student and we are getting the one teacher. If you send the request to first student, then you are getting the actual first student and we are getting the one teacher. Now let's stop one of the services. Let's stop the teacher service. Okay, so we have stopped the teacher service. Now if we send the request, then still we'll get the actual student and we'll get the hard-coded teacher. Okay, let's send the request. Now we are getting the actual student and we are getting the hard-coded teacher. Okay, if you send the request to the second student, you will get the second student, which is the actual one, and we are getting the hard-coded teacher. Okay, you can try the other one as well. We saw how fallback works in Hystrix. Now let's discuss some of the Hystrix properties. I have added 4 properties and I am going to explain all those properties to you. Now the first property is timeout in milliseconds. That means when it is going to call the student API, it should return in 2 seconds. The value is 2000 milliseconds, which is 2 seconds. So if the student API is not going to return in 2 seconds, then call the fallback. That is the meaning of timeout in milliseconds. Now the request volume threshold means how many last requests it should check. Means it will always check the last n request, which is last 5 requests. Okay, now the third property is error threshold percentage. That means out of the last n request, what percentage of request is going to fail, then you are going to open the circuit. Means out of the last 5 requests, if 50% of the request is going to fail, then it is going to open the circuit. I am not sure here because it is a odd number, but if it is 6, value is 6, then if 3 calls will fail, then it is going to open the circuit. Okay, now the last property is the sleep window in millisecond. This means once the circuit is opened, how many milliseconds or how many seconds it is going to wait before closing the circuit. That means once the circuit is open, in this scenario the circuit will be open for 5 seconds and after that it is going to close the circuit and then it is going to send the request to the respective REST API call. Okay, so now I am going to demonstrate one of the properties, that is timeout in milliseconds. So to demonstrate this, what I did, I'll go to the student service and here I have added the thread.sleep to 2000 milliseconds. That means the student service is not going to return before 2 seconds. Okay, and here I mentioned it, the timeout in milliseconds is 2 seconds. Okay, so all the services are started. Let's go to the student service. Let's test this. So the student service is up and running, but it will return after 2 seconds only. Okay, now if we send the request to the BffService, let's see. Now because the student service is not able to return within 2 seconds, it is calling the fallback and we are getting the hard-coded response. Okay, so as usual the code is checked in GitHub and the source code link is in description. If you like this video, then please like, share and subscribe. Also, thanks for watching this video. Thank you.